All right, with that, let's get started. Welcome everyone. My name is Kane Chen. I'm a designer at OppTalk. Today, I'm going to be here as your host for this webinar. And today we are very excited to be holding the fourth webinar of the OppTalk series featuring the one and only Lakshya today. Before we begin our webinar, we do have a few guidelines that we want all attendees to follow. All participants are expected to use their full name as their display name. We do not require you to keep your cameras on, so we'll ask that you keep them off for the presentation. And any messages or any relevant questions that you have can be sent through the Zoom chat function to myself or Joshua, and we'll ask them at the end of the meeting, at the end of the presentation. So presenting today is Lakshya Balchandani. Lakshya is a first-year computer science student at the University of Waterloo. He graduated with an IB Diploma last year and is currently gearing up for his first co-op work term as a CS student this summer. In his free time, he enjoys reading, watching movies, and talking to his friends. Today, Lakshya will be giving a presentation, which will be around 15 minutes. Then we'll move into the Q&A section for another 15 minutes. With that being said, Lakshya, take it away.
Thank you very much, Caden. I just want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I wish I had something like this back in high school, where I was kind of lost deciding what to do with my career because we didn't have the resources available. So it's a great experience. So thank you so much for that. Before I begin, I'm just going to introduce myself. Caden did a pretty good job, but I'm just going to go into a little bit more. But yeah, I'm a computer science student at the University of Waterloo. For those who know me, that's a bit of a surprising thing. And I'll tell you why, because when you think of computer science and you think computer science at the University of Waterloo, you often think of someone who spent years programming, doing crazy algorithms since the age of 9. That is not the reality often. And it's definitely not the reality for me, because before I went into Waterloo to do this program, I had actually spent the last 4 years of my entire high school career focused on becoming a business student. Almost every single one of my experiences and everything I strived for was focused on that one particular goal. And that had its pros and cons. Probably I'm going to talk about those a little bit later, but I was not expecting coming into this program. And a lot of students often ask me, and almost every single one of my friends often ask me, what changed? What happened in that 2 months right before university that made me switch from a career in business to a career in computer science? Why I made those choices, and how I actually, came upon making those choices. And those 2 months were probably one of the biggest and most life-changing of my life. So the point of my talk today, hopefully, is to give you guys some sort of insight on how I made those decisions, and how mainly to, be a computer science student, even if you don't have experience coming in, and to kind of navigate your experience from high school and translate it over to university, no matter what you learned or what you didn't learn. So that's my journey. And I hope that part of that journey is going to help you in some way or some form. But yeah, back in high school, I was a very, very dedicated business student. I did a lot of opportunities in the sense that I focused on DECA a lot. In grade 9, it was a 20 people club. And then by grade 12, when I was president, it was about 120 plus. And I focused my entire time there because I wanted to be a business student. I had that kind of mindset that let me focus on resume building and kind of get the best experience that would look good on my application, my supplementary applications. And none of that ended working out. 4 years in, I did things like Illuminate Universe, where I helped, kids kind of navigate case competitions and the business work field. I started organizations that were focused on business learning. And then when I got to my application for Waterloo, I had almost nothing to write about computer science related. And that terrified me, but I still got in. And, that kind of journey of mine is something I hope you can gain something from. So one of the first things a lot of people really ask me is, why did I end up choosing Waterloo over any other university? Because the truth is, at the end of the day, for a lot of students at the beginning, especially their parents, they want to kind of focus on the name a lot instead of the program. Like, the program is a big thing, engineering, computer science, all that stuff. But they always talk about which university you want to go into without actually discussing the actual climate and atmosphere of the university. And there are certain things about Waterloo that a lot of people mention that aren't exactly true, and that I'm glad aren't true, and they're part of the reason why I chose this. One of the ones that almost everyone talks about is the co-op program. It is probably the main reason why I ended up choosing Waterloo over, say, another university to pursue computer science. And it's mainly because of that co-op experience. I'm actually headed into my first co-op in April. I'm currently applying right now. Over 200 applications have been submitted. It's a grueling process, but the co-op system at Waterloo makes it 10 times easier. So for those who don't really know too much about it, basically it allows me to have 6 work terms during my 5 years, which means I graduate after computer science with 2 years of work experience under my belt. So when I get a full-time position, I have up to, if I choose to, 6 different jobs before I actually get a full-time position, which looks really, really good to employers and helps you secure better jobs and better connections with different companies. So I mainly chose it for that very reason. Now, in that kind of sense, the problem with a lot of co-op or a lot of job applications that the co-op thing really navigates, it's not some magic system. What it essentially is it pools all the jobs and all the connections that Waterloo has with different universities and puts them in one kind of portal. Now, a lot of people in the recent years have said that it's not really useful. You can get those jobs yourself. But the truth behind that is, while you can get those jobs yourself, it is almost impossible to do the same amount at the same scale. What I mean by that is I've submitted over 200 applications, and I'm able to do that because Waterloo allows me to just go on and click apply in the portal. I just have to submit my resume and then I click apply on every single job that I'm interested in. Whereas a lot of my friends who are in different programs have to manually search each job and apply. And that takes, a long time to hit the same amount of applications. And you have to, because the way it works often is you do like 300 applications, you maybe get 10 interviews and like 2 jobs or 1 job. That's usually how it is. And that's why the co-op system is so beneficial. And it's the main reason why I chose it. Another stigma of Waterloo is that it's a very depressing campus. And it's a very depressing atmosphere. I don't think that's the case. I think it's easier for you to get lost and not talk to people. But if you make even the slightest bit of effort, then you'll be completely fine. I personally really enjoy the innovative kind of atmosphere of campus. Like you can just walk into any of the buildings and you can see that there are people working on some amazing things. So the social kind of aspect of it, it's only a problem if you choose to stay inside and not actively do something. So those are the main reasons why I ended up actually choosing Waterloo and going down that path. Now, a lot of people ask me like what I'm up to in Waterloo. They kind of want to get a better picture of what I'm doing because no one really talks about it except kind of like general platitudes. So, I'll talk a little bit about what I'm up to actually right now doing in Waterloo, besides coursework and besides the academic content that I'm actually doing. And it's kind of 3 main things. When I'm not working, when I'm not doing course content and like math or CS for my courses, I'm mainly focusing on side projects. Now, one of the main side projects that I'm working on right now is called, it's like a machine learning recommender engine. It sounds far more complicated than it is, but it's basically, the way there's a Netflix algorithm, when we go on Netflix that kind of recommends things to us, like your top 10 list or your top, movies that you like. All of that is kind of built with an algorithm based on machine learning. So that's what I'm focused on building right now. Something where I can input, for example, a movie name or a book or anything, and it would suggest things that are related to that and kind of give me suggestions based off of that. And one of the best things about CS is the fact that you can apply it to so many different industries. So that right there is an entertainment industry application. So that's something I'm working on right now. Another project that I worked on about a month ago was a COVID-19 stock analysis report, where I kind of just analyzed different trends before COVID and after COVID on the stock market to kind of see what happened. Now, these side projects almost have nothing in common because I like to do a lot of diverse things. And that's one of my favorite things about the computer science program, the fact that I can do all these diverse things. So like the first project for the COVID-19 stock analysis was me kind of dipping my toes into fintech. And the new machine learning one is me kind of trying to explore, algorithms and kind of CS in the entertainment field. So I'm more of the art field and how CS plays a role in that. I also do a lot of hackathons. Oftentimes hackathons get a bad rep, but they're a really good way for you to get real world experience, because oftentimes when you're actually working in a field like software development, your boss is going to come up to you and tell you that in 24 hours, you have to finish this product. And what CS doesn't do or doesn't prepare you, almost any program, is the stress of that situation, because you have 24 hours now to do something completely from scratch. And it's not perfect. It's not going to be perfect. So you have to build those skills, and hackathons usually do that. And I've done 2 hackathons so far, where I created, one of the applications I created was like an interview bot, which basically took information to give you randomized questions based on your field, like technical questions. If I'm a software engineer, I would get a question like, what is open source development? And you would kind of answer it based on a video, and it would convert your video to text and then check how correct your answer actually is based on answers online. And it was basically a way for us to see a problem. We saw a problem. People couldn't, really practice interviews too well with COVID, and we used our knowledge of CS to solve it. So hackathons are really, really fun that way and give you a lot of, room to breathe and try new things. Our newest one was Date Note, and it's kind of like a productivity app as well. I'm also in a lot of extracurriculars. Extracurriculars are turned down a lot now because of COVID, but I'm in the data science club, Coffee and Code, which is just, people sitting down, drinking coffee and coding. It's just literally that. It's a great atmosphere, and the Entrepreneurship Society. So that's what I'm currently doing right now. Now, the biggest thing is my journey in kind of succeeding in CS without any technical skills, because it's a big part of who I am as a programmer, as a computer scientist, because people ask me, and I told them I almost knew nothing. So I kind of wanted to talk about, for those people who are interested in computer science but are too afraid to go into it, what I did before getting in and while I am in to succeed in the program. One of the things I did before just to get in, it's hard, but one of the things that I did was really focus a lot on my supplementary application. Now you're going to have your AIF, which is basically your application that you submit to Waterloo. And a lot of the parts of the application are going to ask you to list things you've done in the past. But then there's one part that's going to actually ask you why you're interested in CS, or why you're interested in the field that you're applying to. And this is probably one of the most important things you can focus on when you're actually writing your application to CS, because they don't want to hear how many hackathons you've completed. They don't want to hear how many side projects you've done. At this point, they don't expect anything of you. And they just want to hear a student who truly understands the program, right? Because people have a very linear approach to what computer science actually is, until you do the research, at least. They think it's just people sitting down and programming, but that's not the case. It's the science of programming used to solve real world problems. And they acknowledge and appreciate when students understand that and give actual thoughtful answers, not based on flexing, their past achievements, but focused on why they want to pursue that degree. And, some tips that I actually have for anyone applying to do that, or finishing their supplementary application for CS, is to do research, because they actually really appreciate when you mention things from their websites or their actual page, and to take a new yet, grounded approach to, and truthful approach to, why you actually want to pursue it in the first place. An example is, I talked about how I was honest. I talked about how I was a business student for 4 years. And even though I had no experience, I wanted to do CS because I wanted to explore the bridge between business and tech. And I talked about how CS is not just programming, and how I'm really interested in exploring that connection. And it ended up helping me get into the program. So it's not impossible, and it's definitely something that you can do if you just put some time and effort into it, and not stress about flexing the amount of programming experience you have or not, because to some extent, or to a certain degree, they really don't care that much. Now, once you're in, it's definitely not easy, because you're in a program now where you have absolutely, you've never done anything that's actually coding related. They actually help you. The courses are laid out really well. So the first course, CS 135, is what you take, and it's laid out in a very good way for students who've never taken coding before. They teach you a language that's not actually a well-used language called Racket, to help you kind of build those fundamental skills. But I realized a couple of things in my, 8 months so far, nearly 8 months in CS, things that I've realized on how to kind of really succeed in the program. And it's kind of like my tips to, succeed if you aren't that experienced. And I think the main one is using our extracurricular learning and applying that learning to side projects. When I first entered, I knew nothing about machine learning, but I knew I was interested in it and I wanted to explore it. So, I went online on YouTube and, read certain books that gave me knowledge about that. And then I started just applying that to start creating the product. It failed 100 times. It still does. But eventually, when you do finish it, you've got a lot of knowledge that you wouldn't have gotten if you hadn't taken the time to actually do that and apply it to a side project. Now, the reason why it's important is because your entire first job is dependent on your side project. So if you are coming into Waterloo or any computer science degree, your first job will look mainly at your side projects and your experience, because you have no work experienced so far. And so students often make the mistake when they come into the program of just focusing on coursework, when it's just as important to focus on the actual side projects that you're doing and the kind of knowledge that you're building. So particularly the ones that I've used is I used YouTube a lot. I used Udemy as well to kind of learn more in-depth, boot camps that I wanted to learn for concepts. And one particular resource that I used that was passed down to me by an upper year who, got a job at FANG. This resource is called Cracking the Coding Interview by Gil McDowell. It is basically the guide for all software developers who want to work at big companies and work at, the companies that have the really hard coding questions and the really hard technicals. And it was a resource that honestly saved my life. It's something that, had so much information and so many practice problems that helped me become a better computer scientist and a better programmer. So for those who are actually interested in getting a copy of it, it's like a PDF. Usually it's $30, but you can email me. My email will be at the end, and I'll send you the PDF. But things like that, connecting your learning with your projects and doing that actively throughout the year is honestly the key to your success. Because I know people who had a lot of coding experience, but wasted their time, at least as of now, and haven't had actually any projects, which made it very difficult for them to get callbacks for jobs in the first cycle of the co-op. So that's something that even if you have no experience on, if you focus on, you will succeed. The other ones are, just hackathons. They're really great experience, and they also add a side project. A tip is companies, especially bigger companies, love seeing hackathons on your resume. When I applied or when I did my interview with KPMG, they said that the specific the hackathon, the fact that I said I did Hack the North 2020, added more weight to my resume, and it's one of the reasons I got the callback in the first place. So pairing your hackathon experiences with your learning and your projects are honestly the best way for you to succeed in the program, no matter how experienced or unexperienced you are. And the other one is just building a good work ethic. This is just something that everyone should do in any program. But if you do not spend enough time on finishing your assignments and leaving enough time for your side projects and your other learning, you won't actually get any time for it. And you'll end up being in that place where you're barely passing by in your courses and you don't have good side projects and experiences to elevate that lower GPA upwards. So finding a good work ethic is just as important in succeeding in the field. So these are the kind of tips or the ways I kind of built off of my skill set, which was almost next to nothing when I entered Waterloo. Now, why did I end up choosing computer science over the other careers? Now, I've talked about this a little bit, but computer science, for anyone interested in applying to it, has a very stigmatized view. Everyone thinks it's just programming, but it's not. The reality of computer science is what actually got me very interested into it. I was going to do I was going to do business for 4 years because I was very interested in problem solving. I wanted to solve problems. What I didn't realize though was that computer science, though technical and though doing it in a different way, was also about problem solving. And when I started doing more research into it, I realized that it wasn't just programming all day. There could be jobs where you did programming all day, but it was such a flexible degree where if I wanted to, I could code far less and, do data analysis if I wanted to, or I could, not code at all and become a technical consultant, or code a lot and become a developer and do it in a bunch of different industries and different fields. So the main reason why I end up choosing computer science is because of the flexibility of the degree and because of what it actually is. It is, it's building your knowledge in a tool that will ultimately end up helping you solve a variety of business problems or just problems in general. So if you're interested in problem solving and you're interested in, solving issues using computer science as a tool, doesn't matter to what extent, then computer science could be a program for you. So that's why I ended up choosing it, because it isn't what people think it actually is. So yeah. Now, how did I make my decision on which program to actually go to? Now, I had about a week to kind of decide where I wanted to go to. And, I had no experience. I mentioned this at the beginning, and I didn't know what to do. I had about a week to make my decision. Was I going to Waterloo, or was I going to go to a business program and pursue, finance, for example? And in that sense, there were 3 kind of key things that helped me make the decision. First off was considering exit pathways. Now, you can really do any any career that you want, no matter what degree you're taking, but it just makes it relatively easier when what you want to do is in the scope of your degree. For example, if I was going to do business, I could do all the business careers, but it'd be far harder for me to do anything else outside the scope of business without a degree from that field, because business would, in that sense, for me, put me in that specific scope. And the same thing with computer science would put me in that scope. But I knew that if I pursued computer science, I could do business if I wanted to. But if I went into business, I couldn't do computer science if I wanted to. So that's something, it's something smaller, but something that, I considered, and I think a lot of students should consider, is that if I go into this degree and I do not like this pathway or any of the pathways, am I still open to do something outside of that field? And how hard will it be for me? So that's an important question I think that a lot of students should ask, and it's something that helped me in guiding my decision. Now, the other two things are probably what helped me decide the most, and that is understanding the difference between industry and career. Now, a lot of people don't talk about this, but it is probably the only reason why I didn't, or the reason why I struggled so much with, exploring other fields. And it's because I thought that, if I liked a particular industry, I would like the jobs in that industry. But that is a completely different thing. Like, you could like medicine, but doing the jobs in the medicine field, which are diversified and ranging, are two very different things. The job and the industry are two different things. And so realizing that helped me a lot, because I knew that I liked business, but did I like doing the work associated with, business careers? Like, did I like doing a finance role? And I realized that I didn't. And while I appreciated the business industry, I could enter the business industry through computer science, because you can enter any industry through the degree that you're doing. Like, you can go into business and enter medicine by the medicine industry by becoming, by founding a medical startup, or by being an administrative assistant at a pharmacy, for example. So that delineation is something that no one really talked about in high school. And it's something that I struggle with a lot, because students tend to group the two. And it's very, very different. It's not always the same. So I knew in computer science that I liked to do the computer science work. And then I had the freedom of exploring different industries within that field. So for computer science, I don't know what field I want to go into yet. But I do know that if I want to go into the business industry, I can explore the merge between business and technology by, working at, bigger companies, or doing technological consulting, or doing software development for, business companies. So industry and career, they're two different things. And that's something that a lot of students, I think, should keep in mind, because it did really help me a lot in making my choice. Another thing is kind of the topic of areas of fulfillment. It's the way I kind of viewed my decision process. Now, a lot of people kind of take a different approach. They look at something that they're interested in. I'm interested in the medical field, for example. They look at jobs in medicine, and, they kind of decide, what, this seems interesting to me. And that often works. And sometimes it doesn't, because there's no way for you to gain actual real world experience on what the job is actually going to be like. So oftentimes people get confused because they don't know what they want to do. But I think the best way to do it is kind of focus on your areas of fulfillment. What I mean by that is every single person has certain things that bring them fulfillment in the general scope of things. For example, some people get fulfillment out of creativity, others out of problem solving, others out of writing. These little things in our life that we like to do that bring us fulfillment should shape our careers, because then we'll be most successful in them. So for example, I was always very passionate about problem solving. It's something that gave me the fulfillment that I needed to. And so when I figured out that I wanted a career that focused on problem solving as a day-to-day activity, I started looking more into computer science and business and all these different industries. And I realized that I needed to ask myself, which career pays, but I also needed to ask myself, I agree that I'm interested in this, but do I actually like the work I'm doing in it? Is the work that I'm doing every day going to bring me the fulfillment that I need? And I realized that computer science offered me that. And I think kind of taking that approach and asking yourself, even if you don't know yet, or at least taking the step to ask yourself, what do I like to do and what brings me fulfillment, will help you go a long way in kind of deciding where you want to end up in university when the time comes. But yeah, those are the things that help me at the end lead me to where I am today at the University of Waterloo as a computer science student. So I hopefully kind of hearing about my journey a little bit helped you kind of get a better understanding of how to approach this and how to best take your own experience and apply it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lakshya. What a great ending as well, especially with those wise words at the very end, talking about industry versus career. That's a big point. Thank you. Now we're going to get into the Q&A section. We've got a few questions lined up from the Google form that we sent out, as well as some questions that you guys have sent in the chat. So Lakshya, the first question, what does a typical day look like for you?
A typical day in COVID might be a very different typical day, but for me right now, often I try to maintain a really good work ethic. Simply, it doesn't always work that way, but I try to maintain a good system because otherwise it can just throw my entire day out of the day out like out. But usually what I do is I wake up and I kind of, plan out my day for what I need to do, kind of like a checklist of things. And usually my day consists of me heading to classes because we have in-person classes, coming back and spending about 3 to 4 hours usually, or maybe a little bit more on each of my coursework, and then working till about 9 or 10 on side project stuff. And then if I've planned after 10, going hanging out with friends. So usually that's how my day looks.
Next question, how do you stay focused and motivated in university?
In COVID, it's very difficult to stay motivated. But I think for me, and it's not for everyone, but some people, there are two different types of people, in my opinion: people who find motivation in a singular driven goal, and people who find motivation in little things every day. For me, I'm the person who needs a goal, right? But I have a friend of mine who is completely the opposite of that. He takes motivation in the little things every day. So there are two different philosophies to it. For me, I stay motivated by having a long-term goal every single day. Like I have a short-term goal for what I want to accomplish in the day, and that kind of keeps me focused and in the zone. But I also have a long-term goal of something that I want to accomplish with a deadline, because I know that I have to reach it by that certain date. And so that keeps me focused because I'm a very goal-driven person. But for my friend, what he does is he sets little successes for himself every single day that works very well for him, because at Waterloo, you're going to have a lot of ups and downs, and being able to weather the storm per se is probably one of the best skills you can have, the resilience of it. So he takes benefit in the little things every single day, and that could work for you, or you could be like someone like me, who's very goal driven and finds motivation in having to prove something to yourself and reaching a particular goal set.
Got it. All right, some questions from the chat. How has the co-op process changed during COVID?
It's gotten much, there's an inverse basic relationship with how co-op usually works, in the sense that by second round, so there's basically two main rounds. There's a first round, which has 2 cycles in it, which is like just two mini rounds, and then another round, and then you go to continuous. Continuous is when you just employers just kind of like spam applications and you get like a reply within 2 days. So the university doesn't really facilitate it that well anymore, and it's just up to you and the employer. And that's called the continuous round. The first 2 rounds are facilitated. Usually what would happen is most students in their first year would have a co-op by their second one, if they have a good GPA and if they have good projects. But what's happened this year is that there's far more students and far less jobs because of COVID. And as a result, there's a huge gap in people who need jobs right now. So in this second round, usually you would have about 30-40 people applying to positions. Last I checked, there was per job. Last I checked, there was 300 applications for one particular job in the second round by the end of it. And I think majority of the cohort, about 60% of it right now, is still looking for jobs. But I think that's just a product of COVID. Usually 99% have a job by the second round, or like the second cycle. And by the continuous, that's for people who didn't get it. So usually you have a job by the second round, but this year it's much worse because COVID has skewed the proportions. So there's more students, far less jobs.
And the last question, are there any side projects, are any of the side projects that you take on the ones that are self-set, or are they more related to a club or some sort of external program that you're participating in?
I wouldn't say any of them are actually part of club related, because usually the problem with the club related ones is they take forever to get up and running, because there's so many people just trying to do it. For example, the best example is I'm in the data science club, right? And there is a kind of big group capstone project that we all have to do. We have to use certain tools to create something. And that has been in the works for a month now. And every time we get on a call, there are people who, don't show up, or aren't working, or aren't focused, or, something comes up. And because of COVID, you can't really, everything's online, so you can't really do anything about it. And so I tend to set my own project goals, mainly based on things I'm either interested in or things I want to learn. Everyone has a different way of doing it, but the way I do it is like some people come like completely like just learn a little bit and then just apply. What I like to do is I like to learn a lot, like, learn a fundamental thing. Like, for example, machine learning, I spent about a week, I think, just learning concepts and taking notes, and then start applying it with my own side project or idea, right? I'm not like, for example, you can search up online, cool things to do in machine learning, or you can just take an idea of yours that you want to and just apply it. At the end of the day, companies don't care. They just want to see it in action, and they want to see that it actually made and that you made progress towards it. So because of those reasons, I tend to just do my own and kind of be self-driven in that sense.
Gotcha. Thank you, Lakshya, for answering all those questions.
No worries.
And sadly, that's all the time we have for today. Feel free to reach out to Lakshya, as he said, if you have any other questions through the socials listed on the slide, or if we couldn't get to any of your questions, you can hit him up that way. Thank you, Lakshya, again, for the amazing presentation. And thank you, attendees, for all your questions. Hope you all enjoyed and learned something new. Just as a reminder, we do have Donnie from McMaster coming in next week, speaking at the same time. So make sure to sign up for that if you're still interested and if you haven't already. If you would like to rewatch the webinar or watch any of our future ones, make sure to check out the recordings that will be posted soon on our website. And feel free to also follow us on our socials, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. That's at OppTalk Official for the latest updates on our initiatives. Thank you, everyone, and have a good night.